Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face when you're sleeping.
10 largest abandoned cities in the world. Many things can define a city, from its culture and food to its residents. But what happens after you take all those things away? There are many reasons why cities are abandoned, and all these stories are just as varied. From villages crumbling during volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, towns being taken over during wartime, and even entire cities being evacuated after nuclear disasters. These things may seem like a John Ford film, but yeah, they do happen in real life. Some of these cities have become tourist destinations like the ghost towns of the American West, while others have been condemned or simply forgotten. So what are the stories behind these abandoned cities? Ready to be odd? Let's take a look at these 10 largest abandoned cities in the world. Number 10, Oradour-sur-Glane. It's horrific just how big and ruined this town is. Oradour-sur-Glane, or as some may call it, Village des Martyrs, is one of the most remarkable sights in all of France, and is worth going out of your way to see. It's located 14 miles northwest of Limoges. Oradour-sur-Glane was the site of a particularly brutal atrocity during World War II. The entire village was shot and burned by troops on June 10, 1944. Within the act of retaliation, an SS detachment of 200 men routed all inhabitants from their homes and into the village square. A search for hidden explosives and an identity check was then announced, which led them to be herded off. Men into barns and the women and children into the church. The troops managed to then lock the doors of the barns and the church, and with dynamite and flammable devices, they set fire to the whole village. Those who survived were finished off by machine gun and grenades, except for 10 people who survived by somehow faking their death until the troop departed. How traumatizing is that? Oradour-sur-Glane now has a museum well known by French school children, most of whom will make a trip there. A sign greets every pilgrim who enters with just one English word: remember. Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it, it really works. Number 9, Taxola. The history of Taxola dates back to the early 1900s. On Interstate Highway 40, 1 mile east of the Oklahoma-Texas border, is where the small incorporated community is situated. Before being called Taxola, the town was called Taxola or Taxoma. The town is known for its rapid decline rate of population. In 1910, the population peaked at 361. After that, the population declined every decade from 337 in 1940 to 45 in 1990. When the 21st century hit, Taxola had 47 residents and served as a suburban area. In 2010, the quantity was reduced to 36 residents. Could you imagine that? Just 36 people in your city. Number 8, Humestone. Humestone is a former mining town in the Atacama Desert, some 100 kilometers from Chile's border with Peru and Bolivia. It was named after a British chemical engineer who relocated to South America in 1875, named James Humestone. It also served as a residential area to the former saltpeter workers from Chile, Peru, and Bolivia. The workers then developed the pumping culture. The culture is expressed in their rich language, solidarity, and creativity, and, above all, in their pioneering struggle for social justice. All these had an intended impact on social history. The Saltpeter Company processed the largest deposit of saltpeter in the world, which produced great wealth for Chile. Humestone was placed on the list of World Heritage at risk to assist mobilizing resources for its conservation after the vulnerability of the structures and impact of an earthquake. Number 7, Mandu. The most memorable moments of a trip to India are spent exploring romantic ruins, forts, and abandoned cities of India. Mandu is one of the numerous that leave a robust impression after visiting it. Mandu is found 100 kilometers southwest of Indore in the state of Madhya Pradesh. It was once the capital city of a northern Indian Muslim state between 1401 and 1561. It's perched on a forested hilltop that soars above the river below. It has lain abandoned for over 400 years and is now a prosperous-looking countryside, clustered with several groups of ruins around 2 artificial lakes. Within the walls are golden wheat fields dotted with tiny villages and stands of baobab trees, whose branches give the complete scene a very African feel. Mandu is the most complete and most romantic abandoned set of buildings in India. Number 6. Varosha. Before the invasion by the Turkish forces in 1974, Varosha, known as Maras in Turkish, was a thriving tourist hub where the rich may be seen strolling along the sandy beaches. Varosha is currently a ghost town where entry is forbidden except for by Turkish army personnel. After 45 years of being abandoned and uninhabited, the Vice President of Turkey, Pripyat Ukraine, said the city is going to be reopened and turn into a major tourist destination as it was before. Currently, there has been a disruption in the reopening of the abandoned town due to the coronavirus pandemic, but it'll gain momentum after. The government said that the properties in the city would be returned to the rightful owners under international law. I find it sweet and honorable that the government is willing to relinquish the land to its rightful owners. I mean, we all know how selfish some member states are. Up next is a fascinating and tragic story of North Brother Island. Number 5. North Brother Island. The North Brother Island is an uninhabited patch of land located within the middle of the East River between the Bronx and Rikers Island. Before 1885, the island was uninhabited until the city purchased the island to build Riverside Hospital, a hospital for people suffering from contagious diseases such as tuberculosis. The hospital once housed a famous resident, Malin, who got the name Typhoid Mary for being unfortunate on being the primary documented asymptomatic carrier of the bacteria that causes typhoid fever. In 1907, Malin was quarantined after the medical authorities' investigation revealed that 7 of 8 families for whom Malin had worked as a cook for had experienced typhoid fever outbreaks. After 3 years, she was released from quarantine with strict instructions to not return to her previous work as a cook. Malin ignored the instructions, believing that she wasn't infected. She returned to work, and after a while, typhoid fever outbreaks began. She was forcibly returned to quarantine at North Brother Island until her death from pneumonia in 1938. After she passed away, the place played host to a rehabilitation center for adolescent drug addicts. It didn't take long when it was closed again in the 1960s. The island then became a bird sanctuary from then and became permanently closed off to the general public until in 2006 when a photographer, Christopher Payne, was permitted to document the place. Payne's work is featured in his book North Brother Island, The Last Unknown Place in New York City. Number 4. Sasania. If an idea gone wrong was a city, it'd probably have to be the city of Sasania. Sasania was supposed to be the Manhattan of La Mancha, with 13,000 apartments housing 40,000 people during a new suburban paradise. A middle-class commuter's utopia far away from the bustle and pollution of its large northern neighbor. In 2003, when the real estate market was booming, it had been nicknamed the Manhattan of La Mancha. It's a scar on the Castilian landscape, seeing fewer than half of the apartments built, several blocks lying empty, and foundations for the others abruptly abandoned, left for the goats to scurry on their way to graze. The Sasania property bubble burst was because the demand for the Sasania development was low. Spain had a high rate of property ownership with almost 78.2% of individuals already living in homes they owned. This made little appeal to possible residents, which led it to having little appeal to investors either. Number 3. Wodenoo. This town, located at the Wodenoo Gorge, is the home of Australia's greatest industrial disaster. Thanks to deadly levels of asbestos, Wodenoo was officially written off from the Western Australian maps in 2007, and legislation was introduced to forcibly evacuate the last 3 residents in 2015. The air in Wodenoo, Western Australia is so toxic that just breathing it could kill you. Yet, during a form of extreme tourism, tourists continue to flock to the town despite official warnings. The forbidden fruit is always the sweetest. And with that, it's now time for today's best pick. Today's photo was sent to us by a subscriber, so if you come across a photo online and want to know more details about it, just send it over to us. We might even feature it on our future video. Number 2. Unknown abandoned city. As much as this looks like a real city, I'm sorry to announce that it's not. I proclaim the photo as a fake. It's not an abandoned city in the least. Saddening, right? But the good thing is that the photo is linked with The Outskirts, the 3rd chapter of The Last of Us. The Last of Us is an action-adventure game that was first made public in 2013. Number 1. Pripyat. Pripyat is an abandoned city in northern Ukraine near the border with Belarus, which housed employees of the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The ghost town was named after the nearby Pripyat River. Pripyat was evacuated after the explosion of the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Before the evacuation, it was initially a young, vibrant, and wealthy place until the nuclear meltdown of 1986 at the nearby Chernobyl power plant, leaving it empty and abandoned. After the explosion, many didn't understand the extent of the disaster and thought they'd only be gone for a few days, therefore they did not bring with them many belongings, including family pets for fear of contamination. How unfortunate is that? I can't imagine abandoning my furry friend. The look in her eyes when I only leave the house is so saddening. Since then, in 1986, the town has been abandoned. It's now a haunting destination for tourists exploring the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Worth a visit? Well, to some extent, yes, but some cities are better left unexplored.